Good morning, Internet. This is the Old Fat Dad, and welcome back to another beautiful day on the Goober Nation gun range. In my last video, we're taking a look at the 17 HMR, a really smoking hot rimfire round, and one of the commenters asked, why don't you compare that to a centerfire round, like the 223? And I thought, I don't think I've ever taken any rimfire and put it up head-to-head against a centerfire round. So today we're gonna fix that. We're gonna get back to that table and show you our centerfire versus rimfire. Now I know some folks in the comments are gonna get up in arms about this comparison. How could you ever compare a centerfire rifle round with a rimfire rifle round? And you know what? To some extent, you're right. There is no comparison power-wise. Let's take a look at the two rounds and I'll show you what I'm talking about. This one here is our 17 HMR, and this one here is our 223 or 5.56 round. Can you see the difference in size? One of these has way more power, way more gunpowder in there. It's just bigger in every single dimension, and it's going to be more powerful. That's indisputable. But I still think this is an interesting comparison to make, just so folks who are thinking about getting one over the other can make an informed decision about it. They know what they're getting with centerfire versus rimfire. So just quick definition of what makes a centerfire and rimfire different. On the back of these cartridges you can see our centerfire has a primer in the middle, that circle right there, and there's no primer on the rimfire. So I'm going to get two spent cases and I'll show you the difference on fired cases. So the centerfire case has that little dimple in its primer, and then we've got this little notch on the side of the rimfire. And that's because they have two different ignition methods there. The hammer, when you pull the trigger on your rimfire, is going to hit the rim of the cartridge and set off a little primer that's kind of spun into the edges that ignites the powder and sends the bullet downrange. Whereas on your centerfire, they got that primer that sits in the middle, and you hit that with your hammer when you pull the trigger, and that ignites the powder. So you're never going to find rimfire rounds that'll ever be as powerful as the centerfire, because they have to have that softer brass that they can dent the side of to ignite the powder. Whereas you can really beef up a centerfire cartridge and get some heavy duty brass that can handle the pressures of a high pressure round, because you're just hitting that primer right there in the middle, and what you're denting is the primer and not the actual case of the round. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about what we're shooting and how we're doing this here. We've got a 62 grain LAP round for our 223 5.56, and then we've got the 17 grain VMAX, and that's going to be in the 17 HMR. Our centerfire round is going to be super fast. It's going probably close to 3,000 feet per second, and the rimfire round is also going to be in that 2,500 feet per second range. Not quite as fast as the centerfire, but it's not that far off. And for a rimfire round, this is about as fast as you can get. There's one more step up, but it's kind of an obscure round now and it's hard to get a hold of, so we're going with this guy for our speediest 17 rimfire round. First up, we're going to shoot the 17 HMR, and this is the Ruger Precision Rimfire chambered in 17 HMR. It's been a nice little shooter for me so far. Very happy with it. We're set up at 50 yards because I kind of want to see, how we're doing with these rounds at realistic shooting distances. Point blank, we know everything's going to explode. Let's see what happens at 50 yards. So down there's a white, am I pointing at it? I can't see. There's a little white box down there, and on top of it is our small game simulator. This is the supersized small game simulator. We're going to start with that 17 like I said before. We'll move up to the 223. Let's see what kind of difference we get. Ooh. Okay, let's check out the slow-mos and then we'll take a look at the actual damage up close. And now for our centerfire round, we've got a Mossberg Patriot now, and we're going to shoot that other can of dog food, see if there's any difference between the two. Ooh, that looked like a significant hit. when I set those cans of dog food up, you probably noticed that for the first shot with the 5.56, I had our little can of dog food, and our hole here is not very impressive. Just a little hole punched through the side there. Let's see if we can get that entrance on there. So there's that little hole in and little hole out. But immediately behind it was our jumbo can of dog food, and as you can see, the green tip wrecked it on its way through the second one. So we saw that, I'm guessing that's where the tumbling happened, and we saw significant damage. Now, let's take a look at what our rimfire round did. So here is the 17 HMR's can, and the front is open all the way up. The dog food got blown out the top and everywhere, and we got a pretty respectable hole out the backside of this can as well. So the 17 is no slouch, but I bet you if I had another can of dog food behind this one, it probably would have just poked a little hole in and nothing out, or it might not have done any damage at all. By the time it gets through this can, that energy is spent. Alright, now let's switch over to the Diet Sprite. We're going to start with the 17 HMR first. This is a pretty big container, a lot of liquid in there. What kind of damage is our little rimfire round going to do to it? Let's find out. Wow! Wow! Okay, it did a lot of damage. Switch over to the Centerfire. Alright, now for our 5.56 round versus 2 liter of Sprite. Okay. I'm not sure what happened. The recoil took me off target, but I saw a lot of stuff spraying up in the air. Alright, here are the 2 Sprite bottles for our rimfire round. I'm trying to find an entrance on this thing, but I can't really see where it went in here. Okay, I think I got it. So here is our entrance right here with the 17. You can see that big cut right there. That's where it pushed in, started expanding, and then totally blew out the backside of this Sprite bottle. That was a very energetic response. Now let's look at the 5.56. So on this guy, again, we had a little tiny entrance compared to what we're going to find on the backside, which is just a big old gaping hole through our Sprite bottle. Again though, the makeup of the bullet is really what makes the difference here. The 17 round is a hollow point designed to expand rapidly, and it is definitely expanding rapidly and doing a ton of damage, but there's not going to be much energy left over after it travels through that first hit. Whereas with the 5.56 round, because it's that full metal jacket, that solid copper and a steel tip with a little bit of lead in it, it is going to hit and penetrate really well and have a lot of energy carried through the first target, in this case the Sprite. If we had a wider target or more bottles lined up, I think you'd see that 5.56 would go all the way through a bunch of them, whereas the 17 would kind of peter out after that big explosive first response. Still quite interesting to see that the 5.56 did almost as much damage as that exploding 17 HMR rimfire round, despite the disadvantage of its construction. For a final ballistic test, we're going to shoot the modeling clay, and I'm going to do it a little different since it's really not a fair comparison to start with. We're going to add another factor in here. I've put one piece of clay behind an old used saw blade, and the other one's out in the open. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the 17. I'm going to shoot the saw blade clay and see if it goes to the saw blade and what kind of damage it does to the clay behind it. And then I'll shift over and shoot the bare clay, and then we'll change over to our Centerfire and we'll shoot the saw blade clay, and let's see what kind of difference we get. So first shot on the saw blade. Knocked everything over. Alright, let's set back up. All right, we've got the stand back up. Got another round of 17. We're going to shoot the bear clay now with the rimfire. Okay, respectable size hole. Let's switch it over to Centerfire. One round of the old 5.56 223 loaded up. We are aiming for the saw blade protected clay. Will she go through? Let's find out. Okay, I can see that the clay got blown off the target stand there after the bullet went through the saw blade. I'm really curious to see what slow motion shows us. So this test is probably going to do more to illustrate the difference between the rimfire and centerfire rounds than either of my other tests, although they were helpful to kind of get a picture in your mind. This really seals the deal. So let me show you the saw blade first. When we shot the saw blade, we had the rimfire hit here and it made a very nice dent. You can see it's got a little lump on the back side there. Did not go through the saw blade. I've shot these saw blades in other videos and they are very tough and they can stop a lot of rounds. But can it stop the centerfire rifle round? There's no way. That thing went right through. And when it hit the clay, wow, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's look at the centerfire hit. I'm sorry, let's look at the rimfire hit first. So here's our 17 HMR hit on the clay at 50 yards. That is pretty nice. We've done a good bit of damage here. It hollowed out the inside. It did not go all the way through, but if you were shooting small game with this, this would be a devastating hit for any kind of small game animal to take. It would definitely have put them down at 50 yards. On the other hand, centerfire. Okay, so we carved out a canyon here. The 5.56 round hit the saw blade, went through the saw blade, and then just reamed out this block of clay. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, the difference is just night and day. So our ballistics tests really illustrated the power level difference and the difference that bullet construction can make between the two rounds, but I don't want that to be the final word. Some of the things you might have noticed while you were watching the video is that there's also a really big difference in the level of sound of the two rounds. Now, both my rifles back here do have suppressors on them, which takes that noise level way down, but even with the suppressors on them, I mean, I can tell the difference here, and hopefully you could hear it on the video, but the 223 is way louder. Another big difference is cost. Now, 17 HMR is not a cheap rimfire round, but some of the other rimfire rounds like the 22, the 22 mag, they're gonna be way cheaper than any kind of centerfire round. It's really rare to see premium centerfire rounds under $1 a pop, and you can get the cheap bulk stuff probably, I mean, if you're lucky, maybe around the 30 to 40 cents range. And the 17 HMR, I would consider pretty much all the rounds that they make for the 17 HMR to kind of fall into that premium category. They really don't have it a bulk option or a cheap option in the 17 HMR. But I think that about wraps up my little competition here, my little demonstration of the differences between rimfire and centerfire. Hope you enjoyed watching it, and we'll see you next time.